this is important. Now, a few things. Here we'll clear the basics only in lieu of the direct classroom. It's difficult to go on and on. Now, reader response, as it's a very telltale name, and you can guess half of what is inside from the name itself. Unlike, say, deconstruction or new criticism, which the meaning of which are not very explicit from the title itself to the uninitiated ones, here reader response criticism is response of the reader. So uh, it has generally it is related to two origins. Two people were working simultaneously towards the same goal. One is Wolfgang Iser, who has a kind of phenomenological background, primarily from phenomenology, which would be very important and interesting task to discuss. And the other person is Norman Holland from psychoanalysis or psychology related criticism. So, unlike other criticisms where we mostly deal with texts or the meaning of texts or the context of the text, reader response primarily focuses on the reader. Its some of its assumptions are like this. For example, when does a text come into being? Very important. We think that a text is out there, book kind of, say this is literary criticism, and we call this is a text. You know, it's a post-structuralist kind of formation, texture, syntagmatic, paradigmatic angles. Anyway, even without that, also this is a text. So it is there. Hamlet is a text, it's there, all Shakespeare texts are there. But the common premise of the reader response theorists is that a text comes into being only when a reader reads a text. Okay, Hamlet may be out there, but till when the moment you read Hamlet, the text Hamlet actually does not come into being. But then the counter argument could also be that if the text is not there, how can you read that? In a way, it is like the chicken egg syndrome. Anyway, I'm not going to that, but this is interesting that they focus on the primacy of the reader, and the text comes into place when a reader reads a text. From that, we go a step further then. Now, no two readers would generally read a text alike. Here it is the beauty of literature, literary texts, even legal texts, even films. Freedom of interpretations are there. There can be many interpretations of a text. In a way, endless. Of course, if you say endless play of meaning, that will be deconstruction proper, but reader response recognizes the plurality of meanings, but not so much, I would say, as deconstruction. The border is, in a way, very hazy. Now, look at this, a very important ongoing incident currently, which I'd refer to as a kind of, say, chronotop or chronos, if not topos, time wise. See this unfortunate, death case. I don't want to name all of naming also, there's no problem, but one side the view is that it's a suicide, the other side view is that it's a murder. So to sharply define, could there be something in between or both also, that kind of possibility. So now finally top class investigating agencies are working at it, some kind of view would be established, but at the same time this will not be the actual thing in a way, because incidents that happen in actual time, they pass by. So unless there is a kind of record CCTV which was done away, it is difficult to reconstruct the actual thing. Anyway, so coming back to the text, where text can have many meanings, multiple meanings. India has been very famous for that, traditional India at least. West also, see, the same Bible is interpreted by Catholics and Protestants differently. Even the constitution of Bible also is slightly different. Protestant Bible does not have a few texts of the Catholic Bible in the New Testament. So the Bhagavad Gita, very, even in modern times, Gandhi's interpretation is very different from Sri Aurobindo's interpretation. To elaborate a little so that you don't think I am talking in the vacuum, Gandhi rejects the actuality of Gita. For him, it is a metaphor. Not so for Aurobindo. For him, it was a real incident. At the same time, it's a spiritual guide. But for Gandhi, it is a clearly spiritual guide. Similarly, in ancient times, Shankaracharya, Ramanuj, Madhva, Vallabha, these prominent theistic Vedanta scholars, they gave different interpretations of the same Gita and the same Brahma Sutra, leading to different conclusions. So in India, it has always been there very prominently. A theory as such of reading was, to the best of my knowledge, not generated probably, but it may have been there. Indian texts are so vast, all have not been put into public forum yet. But yes, so but how this difference occurs? How is Gandhi's version and Aurobindo's version different, or how is Madhva's version and Shankara's version of Gita different, or Catholic Bible and Protestant Bible is different? So reader response group tries to give an answer. It depends on the individual. Every individual reader brings his own background. These days we call it some kind of cultural baggage, that kind of thing. What you have read in the background, it's very difficult. See, Aristotle's poetics, any person who has good knowledge of English can read the poetics and understand it. But at the same time, a person who has a thorough knowledge of Greek literature will understand poetics much, much better, because all the illustrations and references are to Greek literature, especially Oedipus Rex. So, similarly, if an English department student, and I refer to Aristotle's Poetics as English version. Again, at the same time, a English department student who knows only English and an English department student who knows Greek, for example, if both read poetics, then definitely the reading of the person who knows Greek as well will be much more rich, is not it? So, the same with, say, modernist poetry. Modernist poetry, there are so many symbols, there are so many images, there are so many, ways of expression which are not complete. So all these will look totally blank to a person who is not initiated into the cult of modernist poetry. You know, even if he or she may know English. So I think it has been clear by now what is meant by difference in readers. So even, and then these are related to knowledge base, what I have spoken, so symbols of modernism or kind of Greek, English. But even within a class group with same kind of knowledge, there again, one's family background, one's exposure, so many things are very different. So if they respond to the texts on their own without looking at notes or reading, then it has to be different. One who, for example, has very much closeness to nature will find Wordsworth's poem possibly superb, very brilliant. May find boring also, but because he already has enough nature. Similarly, a person who is a city-bred person will have a very different reading of Wordsworth. So try to understand this. Now, Wolfgang Iser says that there are actually two kinds of reader. This is interesting. One is implied reader. Each writer, when he writes or she writes a text, or they write a text, a book, they have a particular kind of reader in mind. Some may do it unconsciously, but some do it consciously. In 18th century novels, for instance, the reader is frequently addressed. Similarly, in Bengali novels of Bankim Chandra, Pathak in between address. So, which Pathak? He must have in mind some average kind of Pathak. So, we can say most of his novels are written for Bengali Hindus. Obviously, Bengalis, otherwise it wouldn't have been written in Bengali. But again, then, say middle class Bengali and Hindu Bengali, like that. So, it's a general implied reader. Okay, so readership. But at the same time, in the process of reading, each reader if he reads or she reads actually. Otherwise, if you read a text to while away time or read it from notebooks, then these theories will not apply. So genuine reading. So if genuine reading is there, then each reader will have a different reading and different texts will emerge during reading. That is called the actual reader. I would like to draw an analogy. Possibly you won't find it in any book. I have added it on my own, between long and parole. Okay, long and parole. Linguistics, structuralist linguistics, and post-structuralist linguistics. So similarly, in light reader and actual reader, or noumena and phenomena. Now, each text has certain codes, certain ways of functioning, certain ways of referring. Say this Wordsworth's daffodils, 10,000 so I at a glance. So if one is not acquainted with the way of poetry reading, he or she would may try to actually think if it is possible to count for the poet or the narrator 10,000 daffodils, and he or she would say that is a wrong poem. In literature, actually, there is no wrong answer, no correct answer. One of my earliest gurus, Pradip Acharya Saraf Cotton, he used to say that in literature there are only good answers and bad answers because these are interpretations. So, one scientific person, or rather a scientist, he criticized on Victorian poetry. Every moment a man is born, every moment a man dies, something like that. A poem is there. He took the statistics of births and deaths of Victorian England and said that the poem is wrong because in a moment, say in a minute, say 50 men are born and 20 men die. So every moment a man is born, every moment a man dies is wrong. That we know poetic truth is different. So these are the kind of readers things, difference between readers. I have given very gross examples because this is all these are basically for beginners. In class we can go for further complications. So gross and simple example I am giving to make you understand, and hope I have made my point. A code means when you say 10,000 at a glance or every moment, so you must know that these are more figurative than actual. You should not go out to measure them inch by inch. Even the so-called realistic fiction are often fictional, more imaginative, but a semblance of reality is created. Now, these days, more than texts, printed text, people are much more acquainted with films, is not it? So, Bollywood films are also texts. So whenever you see a kind of lady alone playing piano, and then in the background a kind of music of tense, something is coming, then you immediately know that someone will come and stab her or do something bad, etc. Sometimes this kind of thing does not happen also, because the director plays with your emotion. You expect certain thing and some other things happen. Similarly, the texts, you know, you read some situation and all that in the text, and then you immediately kind of foresee what can come next. And in case of realistic text, these are mostly true. In case of modernist text, these are not quite true. So, are you getting my point? I mean, texts play with readers as much as the readers play with text. There is a kind of mutuality, though the thing while beginning the video I said that they focus on the reader, but reader cannot exist without text. Reader of what? So reader of text. So finally there is a kind of mutuality or bhava in betweenness, we can say. Now Wolfgang Iser is very important, and Stanley Fish. These two are very important names. Then we come to Stanley Fish, who said initially he talked about something called affective stylistics. This relates to what I have said just now. Certain codes, certain messages, or in case of film, certain symbols, and in earlier films, closeness was not shown often, very, close things. They were expressed symbolically, say honeybee sitting on a flower. If you see old films, Hindi films, I mean, these things, so you know how to interpret it, right? So these are symbols. And or yeah, coming to more religious examples, because religion is so important, lamp in the movies and even serials. A person is at nursing home and he is in ICU, and then the lamp is flickering before a goddess, the diya, and the wife or the mother or the girlfriend praying, and then finally, if the lamp is extinguished, you know that the person in that scene will come later. The lamp will be extinguished first, or it could be vice versa also. So these are the codes, these are the symbols. So according to your exposure, according to your thing, you make meaning. So this is kind of effective stylistics. But later, he Iser also coined the term called interpretive communities. Say it is very simple. Interpretive communities are basically groups. There would be there are different groups of people who react to text, same text different. We cannot go to every individual, so we divide groups. Say the same text, a person from English department or all the persons from English departments will possibly more or less react in a similar manner. There will be some variation, some are similar. But from a science department, um, uh, there will be a these are interpretive communities. What is closest to the actualization of interpretive communities today are, we can say, the theoretical schools, including reader response. So more or less feminists will react to a text in a certain kind of way, though there are feminisms within feminisms, I am aware, but I am not going into the details now. The post-colonialist readers will find one kind of meaning, one type of, so like that. So these are also interpretive communities. And then coming to the analytical aspect, I have kept some notes. Says Norman Holland's thing there. One important addition from his side was that literary text, reading of texts, are basically fulfillment of our repressed, unfulfilled, all kinds of desires. So obviously it has come from psychoanalysis, because psychoanalysis is all about desire and repression, starting with Freud, now Lacan and beyond. So, but we can say, if we go a little further, the origin could be Aristotle. What did Aristotle say about tragedy? Is not a tragedy. Watching a tragedy or viewing a tragedy is a kind of pity and fear. Our latent feelings of pity and fear are made to be manifest. So similarly, Freud said that our repressed libido or sexual desire leads to aggression or neurosis, etc., depending on whether you are male, female, etc. But the artists, the painters or literateurs, they can sublimate their sexual energy in poetry, in painting, in song, dance in such a way, that they do not feel kind of those psychological problems. So in Freudian terms, every artistic creation is basically pathological remedy, or you can say pathological exercise. The same thing Holland applies to the reading process. That why do you read? We say yes. If you read for a degree, that is a different thing. But there also that point will come. If you get a degree, with that what will you? You will get a job. With job, you will get money, which will give you satisfaction, fulfillment. So indirectly the same thing. So the reading also is a kind of driven by our certain psychological needs, our latent fears, our latent desires. It need not be direct pornography, or direct violence film. Dishum. Many people watch these films actually to satisfy their own urge of fighting. It has been proven, this theory. So films are there now in prominence, but earlier books used to be there mostly. So people read books basically to come into terms with their own repressed psychological problems, and after reading they would be balanced. Even today, if you read a very good book, a long book, even a short book, but if long, which say David Copperfield, I read during my BA days the whole novel. So even if you get now very difficult WhatsApp every time, so my advice for students, we have already got a job, we are in the system and all, but you are still, you have to enter. So you try to kind of link yourself from the net for some time and read some texts, at least the prescribed texts, in your courses, the novels basically, I mean, for more than any other text. So after reading a good novel, definitely you find a feeling of completeness and fulfillment. So that is the benefit from the reader's point of view. So this is another aspect of reader response criticism. So I have covered both the aspects. There is the phenomenological aspect related to Wolfgang Iser, and finally culminating with Stanley Fish, and on the other hand Norman Holland's psychological approach. He does not name it a psychological approach, but it is visible that his perception of readers or the affected text on readers is deeply rooted in psychoanalysis. I will go to further details some other day on certain issues in Stanley Fish, basically his interpretation of Milton. So thank you.